So Steve, we're up on this very windy Combe Hill, just walked across, beautiful views all around us, which I think must have something to do with why they're building these things up there.
Definitely.
So obviously a landscape has a lot to do with it. We've got sea over here, valley, which I think is important personally, and sea behind us. What's the main difference between this site and Butts Brow?
Well, one of the significant things with Combe Hill is it's a little bit of a smaller enclosure, and there's some argument it might be a little bit later. The carbon C14 date that was taken is a little bit later than other ones such as Whitehawk and the Trundle, and the early Neolithic pottery is a little bit later than the earlier stuff we've got at Butts Brow. So potentially, whilst they're contemporary, this one could be a little bit after. Not entirely sure, but there's been a few theories in the past that Combe Hill was sort of started and then maybe abandoned, so that's why it doesn't have as many complex sort of outer circuits as Whitehawk and other such monuments. But one of the things we were just talking about was that the word combe means a valley, and it's a very, very old English word, which means that the actual name of this being Combe Hill and that being Combe Valley could actually be a few thousand years old as well.
That'd be amazing, wouldn't it? I think the other thing is that this was excavated, what was it, 40s and 50s?
Something like that, 30s and 50s.
30s and 50s. And it was, as far as I know, it was done perfectly well, but the records aren't particularly good, are they?
Yeah, it was you excavate as of your time kind of thing. Like modern day techniques are very, very different. What was also interesting up here was there was a lot of beaker pottery and some Roman pottery out of the outer circuit, I think it was, but also in one of the terminuses of that ditch there were 3 polished axe placed beautifully, which you've got in the collection. And I think they're in SAC, Sussex Archaeological Collection 132, something like that. But there's a photo of the 3 axes, and they're quite lovely. So potentially this monument was still around. The beaker people, that's kind of the point where bronze starts coming in. It's about 2000 BC. So presumably 1,500 years after this was made, it was still very visible and held some sort of interest for this kind of beaker population, which is why you've got the round barrows around, and obviously you shouldn't call them beaker people. It's still a bit unknown whether people adopted the culture when you get these beaker jugs in, beaker cups, or whether there was actually sort of a population move, because I think the DNA evidence is suggesting it could be a bit of a genetic influx of migrants, but I'm not totally sure yet.
No, I always think it's complicated. So we're probably looking at sort of Combe Hill being, what, 100 years earlier or less than that?
Probably about the same, but potentially there could be 100 years. But this is very, very tenuous at the minute. We haven't anywhere near proved that.
So it could be in operation at the same time?
I reckon they're definitely at the same time being used. The fact that they're so visible, and this point of the early Neolithic is when woodland clearance is starting to really take off. They start a bit earlier, but they could well have cleared all the woodland in between the 2 hills, and they face each other on purpose. Could be.
Well, we were saying on the way up here as well that Butts Brow is actually more visible than Combe Hill from down where Eastbourne is now. Don't know why that is yet, but actually the other hill that we were just on with the barrow on, which I think is called Cold Crouch, that is actually more prominent than both of them, yet that doesn't have one. So it's not just about picking the highest point, it's going to be a lot more complex than that. Brilliant. One of the other things actually we were saying is about the ditch here, about why it is sort of more prominent than Butts Brow, and maybe it is, like you were saying, Steve, that it hasn't been filled in the same way as Butts Brow was actually decommissioned.
Though this is one we're thinking about as we're walking, because a lot of these sites, they do look like they were purposefully backfilled, whereas the bank here is quite so prominent. Maybe it wasn't, although we don't know what ploughing's gone on here in prehistory and things that could have destroyed the bank.
But this just goes to show that just going out for a walk, you end up discussing stuff that we may not have otherwise
hadn't previously thought of.
Brilliant. Okay, we're now going to head sort of down along this ridge a little bit, through the rest of the monument, and then down towards Jevington. Again, look at your maps and it will show you. I'm not really sure what we're going to see next, so we'll just stop at some point when we find something interesting.